In 2003, I stood before the American people. I told them Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. I told them the intelligence was clear. I told them the threat was real. It wasn't. And I've lived with that every single day since. So when I tell you right now that I am watching something happen in Washington that I recognize, not from a history book, from memory. Now, I'm going to tell you something in a moment about what Tulsi Gabbard did in her Senate testimony. That should concern every American who believes the decision to go to war should be based on truth. Hold that thought. Because when we get there, you'll understand that this isn't just one official's testimony. This is the story of how intelligence gets shaped to fit a decision that's already been made. And I know that story better than almost anyone alive. Here's what happened. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, testified before the Senate. And in that testimony, sources have confirmed she omitted a critical finding. Iran had not rebuilt its nuclear capabilities to the level the administration claimed. The existential nuclear threat, the justification for launching nearly 900 strikes on February 28th, was not supported by the intelligence she was sitting on. She left it out. Now, the president said Iran was an existential nuclear threat. Said it with confidence. Said it as justification for the largest military operation in the Middle East since 2003. And here is the gap. The Director of National Intelligence, whose entire job is to present the intelligence honestly, altered her testimony to remove the finding that contradicted him. Those two things together, that is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. I know this pattern. In 2002, my administration was building the case for Iraq. The intelligence on weapons of mass destruction was. Dissenting analysts were sidelined. Contradicting findings were buried. And I stood before the world and told them what I had been told, what I didn't know then, and what cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Was that the version that reached my desk? Was not the full picture. I'm not saying I was lied to directly. I'm saying the process that was supposed to protect me from making a catastrophic mistake failed. Because people shaped the intelligence to fit the conclusion, instead of letting the intelligence lead to the conclusion. That is what I am watching happen again, right now. Let me show you the numbered failures, because structure matters here. Failure 1. The testimony was altered. A finding that Iran had not rebuilt nuclear capabilities to claimed levels was omitted from Senate testimony. That is not an oversight. That is a choice. Failure 2. Congress was not given the full picture. The war powers debate, the authorization votes. Every member of Congress who voted without knowing what the Director of National Intelligence knew and chose not to share. In a democracy, that is not how decisions about war are supposed to be made. Failure 3. The American people were told a threat existed at a level the intelligence did not support. Families in Ohio sent their sons to war. Families in Texas sent their daughters. Families in Pennsylvania are now paying $5 a gallon for gas because of a threat assessment that the person responsible for that assessment knew was incomplete. Failure 4. No accountability in my administration. When the intelligence failures became clear, there were investigations. There were commissions. I'm not seeing that urgency right now. And that silence is its own kind of answer. Now, I want to be fair here. I want to be careful. Intelligence is never black and white. Analysts disagree. Assessments evolve. Probabilities shift. I know that better than most. But there is a difference between intelligence that is genuinely uncertain and intelligence that is selectively presented to support a conclusion that has already been reached. Joe Kent, the decorated Green Beret Trump nominated to lead the National Counterterrorism Center, resigned, said Iran posed no imminent threat. Now, Gabbard's testimony shows the same finding was in the intelligence and was left out. These are not two separate stories. This is one story about how America went to war and whether the reasons we were given were real. Now, I said I would walk you through everything happening right now because you deserve the full picture, not just the main story. So let me tell you what else happened this week, because the week was, by any measure, extraordinary. NATO. The President of the United States called NATO members cowards, publicly. because they declined to join this war. I need to tell you something about NATO. Before September 11th, NATO had never invoked Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause. An attack on one is an attack on all. After September 11th, every NATO ally invoked it. For America, Germany sent troops. France sent intelligence. The smallest nations in the alliance sent what they had. Because that is what alliances are, not transactions. Commitments. I built a coalition of 49 nations for Iraq. I called Tony Blair personally. I called Aznar in Spain. I called leaders across the Gulf. Not once. Not once. Did I call any of them cowards for asking questions? Because I understood something fundamental. The allies who ask hard questions before joining are the allies who stay when things get hard, the ones you shame into silence. Leave when you need them most. And right now, America needs them more than it is willing to admit. This week, 21 days into this war, the Israeli Prime Minister said, and I want to be precise, there has to be a ground component, ground troops. In Iran, I have launched ground operations. I know what that decision costs. Iraq, Afghanistan. I know what it looks like when ground troops go in. And there is no plan for what comes after. 21 days into this war, with no defined endgame, with a leadership vacuum inside Iran, with allies refusing to join. A ground component is not a strategy. It is an escalation without a destination. And that leadership vacuum, 12 senior Iranian officials, the National Security Council head, the intelligence minister, the Basij commander, all dead, all vacant, no replacements confirmed, no functioning chain of command. I watched this happen in Iraq when Saddam fell. The people who understood how to keep that country from tearing itself apart were gone. And what filled the vacuum was Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which didn't exist before we went in. Iran is a country of 88 million people, ethnic divisions, religious factions, political groups suppressed for decades. A vacuum in Iran will not stay empty, and what fills it will determine the shape of the Middle East for a generation. Now, Nowruz, the Iranian New Year. On the eve of Nowruz, 3 protest leaders were executed inside Iran. A 19-year-old wrestling champion, people who had stood up against the regime, grossly unfair trials, international condemnation, and on Nowruz itself. Israel struck Tehran. I have always said, the Iranian people are not our enemy. The regime is the enemy. The people are potential partners. But when bombs fall on Nowruz and protest leaders are executed the week before, the message the Iranian people receive is not liberation. It is chaos from every direction. And then there are the people nobody is talking about. 20,000 seafarers stranded. The UN's International Maritime Organization called an emergency session this week. 20,000 sailors from India, from the Philippines, from dozens of countries, trapped on ships in the Strait of Hormuz, unable to move, unable to go home. These are not politicians. These are not soldiers. These are workers, people who got on a ship to earn a living and are now caught in a war they had no part in starting. The UN is trying to negotiate a humanitarian corridor. That this is even necessary tells you everything about where we are now. The smaller things, but not small to the people living them. The Pentagon asked Congress for $200 billion more. Defense Secretary Hegseth said, and I quote, "It takes money to kill bad guys." $200 billion. On top of the $1 billion a day this war already costs. That is money for schools, for infrastructure, for the families in Ohio and Texas and Pennsylvania, who are already paying $5 a gallon and watching their grocery bills climb because 20% of the world's oil is stuck behind a closed strait. 2,200 Marines deployed from San Diego this week, heading to the Middle East. More Americans in harm's way, more families waiting by the phone. Israel struck Iranian naval targets in the Caspian Sea for the first time, near the Russian border. That is a new front in a war that already has no clear endgame. 220 Ukrainian drone experts are now in the Middle East, helping 5 countries counter Iranian drones. The war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, connected now in ways nobody planned for. Oil hit $119 a barrel this week. It is at $108 now. Every dollar above $80. is a tax on every American family, paid at the pump, at the grocery store, on the heating bill. 1,000 people killed in Lebanon, 204 children killed in Iran. Sri Lanka refused to let American warplanes land, a small country, choosing neutrality, because being America's partner no longer feels like a guarantee of safety. I want to close with something personal. I made decisions that I cannot undo. The Iraq War, the failure to pursue Iran's 2003 grand bargain, the intelligence failures I did not catch in time. I have lived with those decisions every single day for over 20 years. And what I know in a way that cannot be taught, is that the cost of getting intelligence wrong is paid by people who had nothing to do with the decision. The soldier from Ohio, the sailor from Texas, the child in Tehran, the seafarer from Manila, stranded on a ship in a strait he cannot cross. They pay the cost. Not the people who shaped the testimony, not the people who omitted the finding, not the people who called allies cowards from the comfort of a social media platform. I still believe America finds its way through this. The institutions are still there. The oversight mechanisms still exist. But they only work if people of conscience use them, if Congress demands the full intelligence picture, if the American people refuse to accept that the reasons we were given for this war were shaped to fit a conclusion rather than arrived at honestly. I learned that lesson too late, too expensively. I still believe we can get this right. I have to believe that.